a wave of that size.
It was amazing how quickly it was designed and built.
Yes, it was. It begs another question: how were we able to design modified B-17s and then, of course, B-29s for the Pacific primarily, but they were using B-17s, B-26s, and the British Halifax bombers over Europe at that time in such large numbers. Mm-hmm. So the British weren't building most of those, we were, and we were flying them over.
Okay.
Huge convoys, pardon the expression, not a convoy per se, but flight assemblages of flying the bombers over to England, via Greenland usually. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, we beat them, and it took some specialized approaches and hardware. Mm-hmm. We can go into that in much greater detail, sure. More inferences, but...
Let's get to the point where they said, we need your help, you need to go back to 43.
Right. At that point, I said to him, as I had said before, I said, I don't know how you're going to do this, we don't know how we got here. And he said, we have complete control over space and time. They had given us one tour of the tunnel, not operational, past the hardware, the wall, where it was installed, seeing some of the heavy equipment and so forth. And later on, it says, I asked him, well, how are you going to do it? He says, you've seen what we showed you about the Montauk Tunnel? He said, yes. He says, we should be back through that. I says, well, how do you know where the average is? He says, we know where it is, and we know how to get you there. We'll get you there, and they did. But you're going back with radiation suits on.
Was this von Neumann?
Yes.
Who told you this?
Right.
Okay. So he seemed to sort of run the show at this point.
At this point, he did. It was his show because he knew what was coming, and even though he was only a consultant, he let him handle this aspect of it. He didn't handle much else anymore at Montauk, but that aspect he did.
So it was the radiation suit when you actually went through the tunnel?
It was not because of the tunnel. It was because of the fact we were going to go through a hyperspace field, and what they got from the way of the reports from me indicated to them that when we made the trip to 2137, we went through some hard radiation someplace in space, hyperspace, whatever it was we were in, which caused all the physical damage. We were radiation burned when we arrived in 2137. So they weren't taking any chances on it. They gave us radiation suits complete with visors, hood, gloves, everything. And I said, you want to wear these when we dump you through and put you down to the decks of the Everest. Says, after you're on the Everest, you probably won't need them. But we're taking no chances. You're going through with the suits on. When you get there, you can take them off and do what you want.
But obviously the people there in 1943, upon seeing this suit, scratched their head saying, where the hell did that come from?
I think the guys on the deck...
well, the ones who did the investigation.
Well, that's another aspect of this.
Okay.
When we arrived back there on the deck, of course, the guys who were on the deck already, for the most part, were too far out of it to pay any attention to us. So, literally, we took off our visors and left our gloves on, found axes, and started smashing equipment, primarily the banks of 6L6s to cut the drive to the two huge alternators, because we knew if you killed that, the magnetic fields would go down, and then the whole support system for the field would collapse. We also knew it would probably take about 2 minutes before the total field was down, and we'd be back, shall we say, permanently relocated where we started from. It was during that 2-minute gap after the generators were winding down, and when everything cleared up, that we saw the sailors on the deck, the two in the bulkhead, fifth man, and Duncan decides to go jump overboard. He jumped overboard before the fields collapsed, or
right,
it never happened.
Here's what I haven't figured out, though. You're down below deck when you're actually smashing all the equipment, right?
Partially. Part of it was smashed in the
there?
control room. It was on deck in the control room, and then part of it went into another room in the back of that, and then the rest of it was below deck. So we were smashing primarily the control systems, which are on deck level.
Oh, okay. And that's how you were able to see what was happening with the sailors. Okay.
And then we came back up and saw the sailors. No, we didn't climb down a ladder and come back up. We had to go down one short one into one section for other equipment or wreck it. And then we knew the alternators were down. From that, how to say, that secondary level below the primary level of the deck, we can see the large alternators and the drives, machinery, equipment for it, the motor and the ball and gearboxes. We came out and then saw the sailors buried in the deck and in the bulkhead. Duncan decides to run to the deck, across the deck to the rail and jump overboard, looking at me as he was about to go.
So you think he panicked?
I think he panicked because of seeing Brother Jim and all these other sailors in the positions of dying.
Now, this is important. You've talked to him, obviously, quite a bit since that time, and he's admitted that he has some faint memories of the Philadelphia experiment. Did he ever tell you why he ran off?
Never asked him. Now that I think about it, I don't know if I can get him to answer that now, but the next time I see him, I'll try and ask him that.
That would be a good one to know about.
Apparently he panicked because of what he saw with the sailors and what he sensed or felt, and it was just too much for him. So he jumped overboard, he disappeared, and he went back to the future. See, if he'd waited another minute, he probably wouldn't have gone back to the future. He would have wound up in the drink. He would have fished him out of the bay water. But that didn't happen. And then, of course, the fog cleared up. They saw us. We saw the other observer ships, and then, of course, came the boarding parties, and the rest of it I've recorded. I did not mention one other aspect. After the discussion with von Neumann, and of course, shortly after that, he was called to another aspect of his work to come up to the Los Alamos laboratories and begin the discussions on his involvement with the development of the atomic bomb.
Okay, so we're in 43.
This is in 43. This is in October of 43. Probably concurrent with the third test. There was a third test of the Eldridge. They replaced all the wrecked equipment, said, well, put the ship on station, build long cables again, and remove everybody from the ship, and then run the equipment on board the ship for long cables in an adjacent ship. Late in October, one night, they did this, much further downriver, so nobody could be witness to it. There were a few witnesses on shore to that ship disappearing, and they have turned up over the years, but nobody pays any attention to them, basically. And the ship disappeared, came back about 20 minutes later, minus the cables, and when they boarded the ship, minus some of the equipment which was supposed to be operational, and some of it was on fire. So it was at that point the Navy scrapped the project, so they could clean the ship up, convert it for wartime duty, which they did, and it saw war service for a number of years until sometime in 46. In the meantime, of course, other tests were conducted elsewhere, and they were scrapped because they had the same problems. And nothing was revived until late 47 under another code name. Von Neumann was given the task to see if he could revive the project, find out what went wrong, and perhaps come up with a system that worked, which he did in 1953. But in that interim, I was sitting around, literally, in Philadelphia Navy Yard with like a bump on a log, with essentially nothing to do. Just little chores here and there.
This is October?
This was in October of 1943. Another thing that was happening at the time was that my girlfriend was pregnant. The Navy refused to allow me to see her, didn't even want me to talk with her on the phone, didn't want me to communicate with anybody off base because of this Philadelphia experiment problem. It was a very serious problem. They didn't want anybody to know how serious it was. They were afraid I would talk if I got off base or anybody else got off base. There was full restrictions on us. We were quite literally under house arrest, would be the best way to put it, on the base.
Yeah, but think how many people they would have done that to, because they had the three ships,
about
the
20,
carrier.
About 25.
What about the people in the carrier and the other ships?
Same thing. Anyone who witnessed what happened were in the same condition of house arrest. The captain, Harrison, probably was not. Von Neumann, of course, was not. They knew they'd keep their mouths shut because they were at a higher level of clearance, and said, I will, more than once, I will keep quiet.
So obviously then there are still a lot of people out there who have actually seen this experiment happen.
There may be a few left. I would say perhaps not over, my guesstimate now would be 3 or 4.
That's all?
That's all now, yes. But anyway, I had a pregnant girlfriend, and I said to Neumann, I says, look, I want to marry her. They won't let me off base, won't let me see her. He says, can you arrange something? He says, let me see what I can do. So von Neumann was very helpful, and he had a lot of clout at that time, even on the Navy base. So he arranged actually, because I did still travel back and forth from the Navy base to the Institute of Advanced Study, because we were still doing some communication and work back and forth. He finally arranged that I would be married to my wife-to-be and the chapel at the Institute, or actually on Princeton grounds. A Navy chaplain officiated, and we were married in February of 1944. My son Jeff was born, and I remained there doing chores. Saw Von Neumann occasionally. Finally, he asked me, would I be interested in coming up and working in Los Alamos? I said, well, what's involved? And he told me, and I said, yeah, why not? At least get out of here. So he suggested to the Navy I'd like to have me up there, that I could assist him. I knew my math very well. And I said, I need assistance on the project. And the Navy said, fine. And in fact, they were very happy to get me out of Philadelphia and out of, shall we say, into an area where we were totally secluded, because Los Alamos base at that time was the most secret base in the U.S.
Now, did they give you a thorough interrogation as to what happened to you? Where did this suit come from? Those sort of things, do you recall?
No, they didn't give me a thorough interrogation about that. See, there was one suit left on the deck. That was mine. The other one remained on Duncan when he jumped overboard to go back to the future. So there was only one suit left, and they thought that was awfully strange. They didn't ask me any questions about it. I didn't give them any answers. It's very peculiar that the story of the suit should turn up much later, decades later. I'm not in a position to say who became involved with this. It was a very close friend of mine here in the Atlanta area, who at some time in his career in the past, working with the government, at one of the meetings, was called in, and sitting on the table was a spacesuit, or what appeared to be a spacesuit with a visor and everything else, exactly like I've described it. And they asked him, what do you know about this suit? He looked at it and says, not a damn thing. What is it? He says, well, it's a radiation-proof suit and so forth. Do you know anything about it? No, I don't. They found out later it was the one that came from the deck of the Eldridge.
How in the world did he get that?
He was very high-level clearance at that time when he was doing work for our special agencies within the government. And why he was queried on it, I have no idea. He doesn't either. But apparently they were asking everybody for ideas, whatever the motivation was. Don't know. But in any case, I went to Los Alamos and was there from July 44 with family, and to July 4th, sometime in July 44 to July 4th of 1947. I uncovered a lot of things in the Black Vault, which I was given after the war was over full access to, because the Navy wanted me to write a classified report dealing with the development of the atomic bomb, and I had access to everything that was in that vault, which included the German records of their work on developing a bomb, where theirs came from.
So you knew all the key people?
I knew all the key people.
Wow.
Including Oppenheimer quite well.